Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the SOM TV podcast. My name is Jason Wise. On today's episode, we are going to be covering the topic of wine storage, and not just storing your bottles of wine, but storing precious and large amounts of bottles of wine. On today's episode, I'm going to be interviewing the CEO of WOVO, one of the most respected wine storage companies that started with art storage and fashion storage. So climate-controlled, very, very detailed ways of storing almost priceless works of art. And they got into the wine storage business, and it's been a very eye-opening experience learning from them kind of how they went about it, how they prepare if there's a natural disaster, what do they do to keep all of these bottles safe, and what are some of the craziest bottles that they do store. So on today's episode, we're going to talk all about that. Before I do that, I want to tell all of you, go to SOM TV and subscribe. Right now, you can get SOM TV for 50% off on a monthly subscription if you enter SOM TV 50 at checkout. 50% off. That is less for a year than almost any regular bottle of wine, let alone something really great. So go to somtv.com and enter SOMTV50 at checkout. Without further ado, my conversation about the art and science of storing wine with WOVO. Now, out of all the concepts that we have covered, from everything from NBA players and soil and different types of oak and wood and cork, and you can't cover more about the wine industry and the food industry than we've done on this podcast and this show. But I realize the concept of storing wine, the concept of putting something away for various reasons, is something we have not covered extensively. And so, Jeff, it's really, really cool to have you on the show today to talk about the concept of wine storage and all of the different facets that touches, not just in wine, but in luxury and preservation of in some cases wealth and all of these things. So
look, wine is an asset class. I mean, it's like art. It's it could be fashion. The litany of people that store with us range, frankly, from college professors to people that are connoisseurs or investors or collectors that are really highly intelligent about wine, because wine is just one of those emotional things. And so if you're gonna buy wine and you want it to age well, and you actually believe in science, which is debatable. There are people that think science is overrated, but there is data, Jason, that indicates that if you store wine, and I have maybe a story that I can get to later on, but if you store wine in the trunk of your car in the middle of the desert, it's like storing steaks on your garage floor. It's just not a good thing.
That's a grim image right there. I don't like that.
To be frank, only about 5 to 10% of wines actually improve after 1 year. And just 1% of wines improve after 5 to 10 years. So the wines that we store are in the top, frankly, 0.1% of wines. Most wines, the vast majority of wines, are consumed within 1 to 2 years of bottling. So we store wine primarily for people that buy wines that range, let's say, between $100 a bottle and $20,000 a bottle or more. So it's a narrow universe for people that decide that they want to pay money to have their asset taken care of.
I will say this. I have had a lot of wines that were supposed to age well and were stored perfectly that just didn't seem to do well. And I've had some wines, and I'm talking about inexpensive bottles from the 60s and the 50s and the 70s that were, when I say not meant to store, I mean, they were meant to be drank immediately. They were forgotten. And there are some wines from the 70s. I found one in the cellar of a game show host named Peter Marshall, who I worked with on a film. And this wine, this Cabernet from Napa in the 70s, was not supposed to be stored. And we opened it. It was one of the most glorious things. So I do find, as much as I do believe in science, that there's a lot of magic with wine storage as well, in that it's hard to put the elixir together perfectly to say this wine's going to improve or just at least hold for years.
No question. Science is just one part of it. I mean, there are wines, for example, Cabernets, the example you gave, tend to age quite well. They will last 10 to 20 years if stored correctly. There's a wine from Bordeaux, a Sociando Malais from 82, that because of the level of tannins in that wine, you can drink that wine up to 2040. So a lot of it depends on the wine itself, and a lot of it depends on how that wine is stored. Look, we have clients that range, the gamut. A lot of people, first of all, we have a lot of people that live in Manhattan or in Chicago or, large cities where, they don't have the luxury of building a wine cellar in their home. And even the people that do build wine cellars in their home, and we'll get to that, it's not quite as well organized as you might think. Unless that wine is safely, securely stored, you can't really count on it being drinkable 20 years later, 30 years later. So you have to be able to, first of all, you have to be able to tell the difference between good wine and bad wine. I can tell you that we often have events, and we do this just as an experiment, Jason, just sort of for fun, where we'll take a case of wine to an event just to pour, for the people that show up at the event. We'll keep 6 bottles of the wine in our trunk for a week at 90 degrees, and the other, and the other we won't. We'll serve it correctly stored. 99% of the people can tell the difference. They may not be able to tell the difference when it first hits their tongue, but there's an aftertaste when it gets back to the back of your tongue or your throat where you can clearly tell the difference. So there is something to this concept of wine storage. And I can tell you that, there's a historical context going back to your original question, that the Greeks and Romans actually stored wine because some of the grapes that they turned into wine, they felt would last for decades. And so, although WOVO was not part of their storage strategy way back then, this concept of storing wine correctly is rooted in history.
Well, it's also the concept of, why is a cellar below ground? Well, I'm sure thousands of years of trial and error of, like you said, 90 degrees in a car is a pretty extreme example, but, just storing wine on a kitchen counter, even if it's room temperature and light's allowed to permeate it, can really change things. The concept of storage is something that totally makes sense to anybody who's ever been to Europe or a cellar in somebody's house. But I guess from a standpoint of storing wine, how does it go from, because you said something earlier that I think is quite fascinating, that wine is how did you word it? You didn't say a luxury product. You said it's an asset.
I called it an asset class.
Interesting. Do you feel that way about all wine or just the certain class of wine?
Yeah, no, for people that buy cases of $20 wine, I wouldn't call it an asset class. And those people don't consider it an asset class. They're buying that wine for consumption and enjoyment almost on an immediate basis. They're going to a dinner, they stop at a wine store, they buy a $25 bottle of wine. But there's a lot of emotion that goes into collecting whatever it is. It could be wine, it could be art, it could be, there are channels on TV about people that collect antiques. So, this is a country of hoarders and people that are, it is what it is. And some of those people collect wine, and they collect it for various reasons. I can't explain all of the reasons, but there's something emotional about wine. And the example I would give you is we'll host events at one of our locations. Some of those times we'll invite wineries to present their wine. And sometimes we'll just have an event for our collectors or people that store with us to bring a bottle of wine and share it with, other people that store. And I have to tell you, Jason, that some of the wine that they bring is incredible. $500 bottles of wine on up. And when I first joined, because I'm a tax lawyer by training. I've never been a wine guy. I grew up in a house where it was sort of a combination of Manischewitz and Matus that might have been served, if in fact it was ever served.
Yeah.
And I found it
not an asset class. Not an asset class.
No. And I found it incredibly interesting that these people would bring wine and share it with people that they frankly didn't know. There's something about wine that just brings people together. And there's that emotional piece of it that it's hard to put your finger on, but it sort of lends itself to the myth about wine, is what I would tell you.
I mean, I don't know. I'm a like most dads. I'm very much into history, and I think that there's nothing in the world that allows you to springboard into talking about whether that history is 10 years ago and you're talking about your kid's birth year, or in some cases like World War II. Or these
Mhm.
are conversations that you don't often have over pasta. You don't often have them over pizza. You don't often have them over orange juice. But when you put wine in the conversation, it's got a little date on it. It there's something when you say romantic. I think it is incredibly romantic when somebody thinks, "Where was I in 1981?" And
So
you start thinking, "Yeah,
and obviously none of this is rehearsed, but can you, and I know you're interviewing me, but can you remember your first sort of romantic slash emotional tie to wine? Because I can. I think about, as I said earlier, I'm a tax lawyer. I spent 15, 20, 25 years with an accounting firm, KPMG, and was a tax partner. And now I find myself at the helm of the largest wine storage company in the United States. I think we stored 5.5 or 6 million bottles of wine. But it's always been, I can't say it's always been, it's been in the last, say, 42 years, a huge interest of mine. But it was, I can remember back when I first said, wow, this is really cool. Can you?
I can." Yeah, I mean, honestly, there are a couple different ways to approach this, but when I was making Psalm 1, so the first Psalm film I directed, this is God going on 14, 15 years ago, we started filming it, maybe even more at this point. And a sommelier who was still working the floor in some capacity named Rajat Par up in San Francisco, he opened up, he asked me what my birth year was, and I said it was 1980. And he went into the cellar and he got me two bottles of wine, and one was a German Riesling. And this German Riesling that was a 1980, I had never had a birth year wine. It was the first time somebody had ever poured anything like that for me. But on top of it, I had never had an old Riesling. I had had what I thought was what a Riesling was: sweet, and just not a wine I particularly thought was wonderful. And I will say, drinking this wine, the acid was racy. It had a beautiful kind of through line to it, and we were also having fried food at the time, and it changed my life. I mean, this bottle with fried, it was like really good duck fat French fries and all of the stuff we were eating with it. And my mind was blown in from three different angles. First, I'd never had a wine from my birth year. Second, I had never had a wine that went so well with food. And third, I never realized how much I didn't know about something in 1 second. I mean, now I consider when people tell me that I just don't like Riesling, I don't look down on them. I just think you have not had the right one yet because
Correct.
you don't. And so
Correct.
anyways, there's a lot of those kind of experiences, but that was early for me, and that was not an expensive bottle.
My answer is, as I said, I'm from Philly. It did a bunch of tax work, and going to graduate school in New York, I met a French girl in the law library of NYU. That French girl, I volunteered. I do that in air quotes, to move to Paris in 1982. I married that French girl. I'm still married to that French girl. So we're going on 43 years, I think, if I did the math correctly. And living in France and going to dinners with people that, where wine was, almost always served. And so I began to get interested in it. And the one event that I can think of was I have two sons, and one who they were born in 85 and 86. And so in 89, I found myself in the Beaune region of France and woke up early and walked through the vineyards of Hospice de Beaune. I can remember the fog sort of lifting from the vines. I can remember this 4-year-old holding my hand, walking through those vineyards. And, to this day, it's almost emotional. I don't get the same feeling when I drink a Petrus, but it is what ultimately got me interested in wine. Little did I ever think I would wind up, in my older years, at the helm of a fantastic company like WOVO.
Let's talk about this company, WOVO. So I want to know because I know there's a transition here from art and fashion into wine. And I want to know how WOVO got into storing wine. How did this become a thing? And then how do you model something like this? I mean, it's to me, it seems so many variables, I guess, based on where you're at and based on. So let's start with kind of how did WOVO get into wine storage?
So let me go back to how it got into art in the very first place. So it was
Sure.
founded by a guy named Steve Gutman, who had a fair amount of art, and I would say was he had a fair amount of art, maybe not enough walls to put it all up, and so was sort of dissatisfied with the storage industry, and frankly decided to address the problems himself. And artworks, depending upon where you store them, just like wine, just like anything else, they get lost, they get damaged, and so he decided that he was going to pair sort of exceptional facilities and inventory management with high touch client experience. And so he began, let's just say 20 years ago, in the art space and has carved out a real niche for WOVO in that art space with museums and private collectors, and it goes on and on. I would say about 5 or 6 years ago, I could be slightly off on that, but he got into the fashion space. And then I think 2 years ago, he bought a company called Domain, St. Louis based, had been in existence for quite a while and had a terrific reputation. And I think the thinking behind that was twofold, Jason. One, if I can store art and I can store fashion, I should be able to store wine. Secondly, and I don't need to go into huge detail here, a lot of people that buy art and store art probably drink wine and vice versa. And so there's clearly a linkage between the three businesses. And frankly, that's how he got into the wine space. And I joined, I don't know, a month or 2 months after his acquisition of Domain.
I guess it's when you're thinking about climate controlled things, humidity, all of the things you would need to do with storing. I mean, I couldn't even imagine. Wine sounds simple to me because maybe I'm more familiar with it. But geez, storing a painting that's worth millions of dollars, I wouldn't even be able to begin to think about the parameters around that. Those are different facilities, I assume, right?
They are totally different facilities. I would say, incredibly or sadly, art is perfectly stored at 70 degrees and 55% humidity, and
Mm-hmm.
and wine at 55 degrees and 70% humidity. So, sadly, although it'd probably be great for the bottom line, we do not share locations.
Yeah,
Uh,
that makes a lot
so,
of sense.
right. So that's number one. Uh, Number two, if wine is an asset class to you, or even if it's just a hobby, and you want to make sure that your wine is safe and secure, because I could go through a whole lot of the litany of services that WOVO provides, but more than anything, you have an option. You can store wine in your house, right? I mean, or your apartment. Now, I can't say that you keep your apartment at 55 degrees, but maybe for you, keeping the wine at 55 degrees is not that important. So you have to make that decision, assuming you have the space, as to, do you want to store it correctly? If you don't have the space, and a lot of our clients are living in larger cities where they don't have the space, or even if they don't live in a larger city, they just want to make sure that their wine is safely secured, and that it's attainable. So, we store their wine, and when they want their wine, we'll deliver their wine to them. I cannot stress to you, Jason, enough the importance of our relationships with our clients. It's built on trust. It's built on safety and security.
Yeah. Well, what are some of the challenges? I mean, aside from everyone has a different size collection, everyone has a different, value to their collection. What are the challenges with doing this, storing people's personal collections?
It's interesting because we're not out there, sort of aggressively trying to convince people that they should store with us. I mean, most people find us through word of mouth. So we basically do what we said we would do, and we have a pretty satisfied group of clients. And then if they know people who are in the same space that are looking to collect wine, they say, you know what, you ought to give WOVO a look. So in answer to your question with regard to challenges, I mean, look, all industries have their ups and downs, and the tariffs that were or are or may be imposed certainly has an impact on the wine industry. I mean,
Oh, yes.
without question, I'm sure you've heard about wineries in Napa or on the West Coast or frankly Bordeaux, uh, and importing into the United States. So if I had to say one challenge, it's lack of certainty with regard to the industry itself. I think it has an impact on people who want to buy wine as an investment. Just it is what it is, and it'll sort itself out, just like it did 4 years ago or 8 years ago, or you go through cycles on this, and there are years where DRC increases by 10%, and there are years where it increases by zero. But other than that, it's the business is a pretty solid business. Our client base is a pretty solid client base.
What about, I mean, because in the end, you're dealing with a physical place. No matter what you do, it's not that this isn't in the cloud. I mean, this is a building with a lock. And how do you deal with things like, I don't know, flooding, hurricanes, your basic, if you're in Miami, Florida, and there's a hurricane headed and you've got all this wine, I'm just so curious about it's such a tactile business you're in. You have to be able to hold these things. How do you deal with the act of God, I guess we'll call it?
Well, things are called acts of God for a reason. So, you can't prevent them. So that's number one. Number two, unlike a few other people in our space, we do provide loss protection so people can insure their collections with us. And there are some insurance companies out there that will insure off-site, but I only know of one, maybe two, that will do that. Most will insure if you have a separate rider to your policy at home, and you have a wine cellar, and you delineate all the wine, you can insure that. But very few of those insurance companies will insure offsite. We do offer loss protection if you so desire. But number three, as you said, look, first of all, when people store their wine with us, we have two different sort of models. One is you just rent a locker, you put your wine in there, and it's all yours, and you take care of it. The vast majority of our clients fall into what I would call managed storage, where we actually inventory their wine. So we check the condition of their wine. We put it all in a database. We share that database with the client. We let them know when the best drinking dates, let's say between year X and year Y, are for them. If they want to drink it, they can drink it. If they want to liquidate it, we can help them either through auction or consignment. We can help them with that. And if they want to increase their collections, we actually offer that service also through a branch called Cellar Trading. But to your, as I said, you can't prevent an act of God. All you can do is for people that store, let's say, in their homes. And we've had two instances that readily come to mind. One on the west coast of Florida, where a bad hurricane last year hit. The weather science is not an exact science. They don't know if it's a category 2, 3, 4, 5. And so we will get calls in advance of that where they say, listen, can you please help me? Can you pick up my wine, store it for me, either just store it or store it for a period of time until this passes, and let's see what the damage is. We are there to try to help them. The second example I can give you is fires in California. And, to the extent that we can get in there before all of the damage occurs, we will do our very best. I mean, an interesting story is the guy that is in charge of business development for us in the Chicago area, young guy that began to collect wine, and there was a fire. I can't recall if it was his house or close by, and called at the Time Domain and said, listen, can you guys help me and pick up my wine and store it for me? He then became an employee and is now, doing terrific. So, there's no real perfect answer to that. It gets back to the trust piece that I raised earlier, which is, we have sort of deep relationships with many of these clients. I wouldn't say we speak to them every day, but probably a month doesn't go by where we don't speak to them. And, we ask them questions, they ask us questions. We're trying to help them. They're looking for advice. And so these are deep relationships. And if an unexpected event occurs where we can help them, we're there to help them.
What are some of the craziest, I guess, most valuable, most interesting? You don't have to name names of who stores with you, but I mean, is there like you know, Koch brothers or LeBron James or somebody like, who's got millions and millions of dollars worth of wine? I mean, do you have collections that are at that level? What are some of the most
So the answer
interesting?
is the answer is yes.
Uh-huh.
In keeping with, you don't have to name names. I
Sure.
will
Okay.
follow your direction on that.
Okay.
So look, I I'm trying to tread lightly on this, Jason.
Okay.
So look, what I would tell you, because you're looking for something that is hugely impressionable. I can tell you this: when I walked into our Edison location in New Jersey, where we store a lot of wine for the tri-state area, I can't tell you exactly, but let's just say 15 or 20 rows that go up 25 feet to the ceiling of wine, and it is by far our largest location. And when you looked at these original wood cases of simply priceless wine that was quietly sitting there at 55 degrees and 70% humidity, I'm just telling you, I could not help walk those aisles and have to close my jaw constantly. It's I'm not going to say it's irrelevant, but just trust me, the wine that was in there is from top
Like
to
what? I
bottom.
mean, like what kind of wine? Are we
Well, I
talking
mean,
like,
like DRC at
uh-huh.
$10,000, $15,000 a bottle, and cases of it, or any of the first growths. And I'm focusing more on the French stuff than the Screaming Eagles. But everything that you can imagine or anybody's ever spoken to you about. And I mean, look, we have collectors that have 10,000 cases of wine, and they readily admit, we have conversations frequently where they go, Jeff, I'm probably not going to drink all the wine I have. And I say, listen, I'm not a doctor, but I think that's probably a prudent approach.
Yeah.
uh, they're looking for a way that they can monetize that at some point. So it runs the gamut, Jason, in terms of collectors. As I think I said earlier, I mean, we have college professors that store 10 cases of wine with us. And it's all across the country. I mean, now, we have 15 locations, one in Napa, three in LA, Dallas, Denver, Houston, DC, New York, Pompano, Chicago, St. Louis. I mean, we're in a bunch of different locations, and we're servicing, people of all walks of life that have one thing in common, and it is their love of wine.
So every single bottle that goes in, you've cataloged that. So they know there's an 1870 Madeira. There's a, you know,
Yes, yes.
I would be
We
so curious I mean, there's got to be the top 5 most common wines that are stored across the board. I would kill to know. Like, what's the most common wine? Meaning, like, there's more Chateau Palmer that you store than any other wine. I'm just curious. Do you know? Do you guys have that kind of data that more people are storing this producer or this wine or this vintage?
So yes, we have the data.
Uh-huh.
I haven't sorted that data for purposes of this podcast, but I certainly could. I know you would kill, and so long as it's not me, I'm happy to provide that to you. Um,
Sure.
but yeah, I mean, I would say honestly, it's all over the shop. I mean, look, there are certain wines with very limited production, so you're not going to get huge amounts of people that store Mouton Rothschild. You'll probably find a wine that is more mass produced, but probably not as fine as a Lafite or a Latour. But yeah, I mean, and again, we have a lot of clients that store a lot of Spanish wine, but again, Vega Sicilia, which I think is this personal, is one of the finest Spanish wines, is not produced in enormous amounts, so it would not show up as one of the top 5 wines that we store. But yes, we do a full inventory for these clients, and there's a million ways that you can sort a database, so it's not that difficult to do.
The idea of cross-referencing data just really makes me fascinated to know what people are buying. What are they? And also, you can probably uncover trends. I mean, I would
Yeah.
assume at certain times, whether it's a movie or an athlete or somebody influencing something, or just the fact that it happened to be a good vintage. I would be so curious to find out in this year, everybody bought up this wine or something. It's just, for me, I
Yeah.
find it to be, because
Well,
wine obviously, can be a lot of
for,
things.
for us, the use of data, I would say, is important in one aspect. We know the buying patterns of our clients.
Mm-hmm.
And so we have, a lot of clients that love Spanish wine, or they love French first growths, or they love California Cabernets. And as I mentioned earlier, we have an arm of the of WOVO wine called Cellar Trading, where we offer wine. If I was buying wine, I often go to Wine Searcher, and I often buy from Cellar Trading, just because I know the provenance of the wine that we're offering, which is quite
Yes.
important, and
Yes.
I know the pricing. And so for our larger collectors, we know what they're interested in. And when we see things that we think will pique their interest and that they might be interested in purchasing, we'll offer that to them. So the data piece of our business is quite important.
Yeah, that is one of the most underrated things is the wine. And I don't mean genuine in that it's not counterfeit. I mean genuine that it's been cared for. I don't think people think of wine this way, but it's kind of like a classic car. You have to maintain it.
Yeah.
And sometimes with
Yeah.
wine, maintaining it means don't mess with it, but put it in the right place.
Right.
It's a truly underrated thing when it comes to wine.
I didn't want to make a big deal of it, but provenance is hugely important. I think I mentioned it once or twice, but sort of in passing. But
Mhm.
to know that wine has been safely and securely stored, even the auction houses, they do their own due diligence before they offer wine for auction. And when we have our clients that decide to auction wine off, and we will help them with our relationships with those auction houses, the fact that that wine has been stored with WOVO certainly is helpful. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, it again, like a classic car. It's like you've got all the
Yeah.
receipts of the oil changes and the tune-ups, and it's basically here's where it's been and what it's done. So,
Yeah.
do you store your collection at the facility? Do you have a
Uh,
collection?
so yes, I do have a collection.
Hmm.
I store my collection in my wine cellar in my house. I used to, funny that you would raise this, I used to store wine at way before I got involved with WOVO, at a warehouse in Manhattan. This goes back to when I first moved back from Paris in '94. I moved some cases back with me. I stored it there, and magically they disappeared. And so happily, I was insured and was fully reimbursed for it. And that's why I stress to you the importance of loss protection and being sure that you're storing with a reputable company. It's almost taken for granted, honestly. You just figure that if I'm going to park my car here, when I come to pick up my car, it's going to be fine. Or if I put my money in a bank, when I want to take it out, I'll be able to take it out. Maybe you shouldn't take it so much for granted. And we
Sure.
sort of pride ourselves on, being able to take out your wine when you want it.
Yeah, it's funny to think about it that way, but it is true. I mean, it is a physical item.
Yeah.
It is a physical thing. Well, is wine storage going to change? I mean, is the technology at its peak? I mean, what can change in the future about the way we do this? I mean, you guys are at the forefront of this, so there's nobody better to ask.
Yeah, I mean, look, I don't want to get into what impact AI might have on this, but I think that the wine storage space, I don't think it's going to change dramatically in the years to come. I mean, again, I go back to people are looking for their wine to be safely and securely stored. That's the number one priority. And then there's the litany of other services that people are looking for, which is, for example, if I'm moving from, I'm going to pick New York to Phoenix, can you transport my wine? Can you inventory my wine? If I have my wine in a home cellar, and, Jason, I've been in many home cellars where it's a beautiful home cellar, but the wine is all over the place. I mean, there's wine on the floor. It's a complete
Oh,
mess.
everyone I can think of is like that. Now
Okay.
that you
Well,
say
they're
that,
right. So So at some point, somebody decides I'm going to bite the bullet, and they call WOVO and, can you help me? Can you help me inventory it? Can you help me store it? Can you set up some kind of technology where I can track the wine myself so that I'm not dependent on you? So all of the transport, all of the inventory, all of the safety security stuff. I mean, look, what I would tell you is we do everything for a client other than drink their wine. And you could probably convince me that I could help them in certain instances to help them drink the wine. But
Sure,
but
of
that's
course.
that's really that's really what we're about. It's about trust and building deep relationships with our clients, and just making that whole collecting experience that much more enjoyable.
I mean, I guess I should ask you should plug it. How do people do it? If I wanted to, so I've got a cellar, I've got a bunch of wine, and I'm thinking about collecting more. How do I even start this process?
Well, first of all, I can give you my cell phone number. So, I mean, you can always, you can always call me directly,
Fair.
but I mean, if you go to wovo.wine, the purpose of this is not, frankly, to plug us, but I mean, look, and people, when I say wovo.wine, they're gonna start with a W. So it's an Italian name that is spelled UOVO. In Italian, it means egg. I didn't make up the name, but it is quite appropriate, because what we do is handle fragile items, whether it's art or wine. And so go to uovo.wine, and you will be directed to the right place, or I'm sure you can find my name on that website, and call me directly. I'd be more than happy to help you.
Sounds great. And it's what a fascinating business, and one that I just don't think people think about enough. I mean, look, I've got young kids. I'm on the go a lot. I work in the wine industry, I suppose, but most of the wine I buy is not to save, not to appreciate value. It's because it's Friday and I need a drink with this chicken I'm making. I mean, for me, it's because I'm constantly moving. I'm not at the age where I'm like sitting and thinking about things. I'm moving. The other thing I will say, if that wine was not at my house, it'd be better, because I wouldn't drink it. And I need to get that. I need to get the stuff that's worth money.
Look, Jason, I mean, I can't tell you how many clients that we have where they go on a trip, they live on the East Coast and they go on a trip to Napa. And inevitably, they go to winery number one and they buy a case of wine because it's great. And then, and that's at 10 a.m. And then at 1 a.m., they taste more wine. They buy another case. They wind up leaving Napa. They bought 8 cases. When they come out of the ether, they go, okay, now what do I do? Where do I store this wine? What am I going to do? And, we will, if you open up a storage locker with us, we'll ship your wine. And the other thing, by the way, that I didn't make hay out of is a lot of people ship wine by FedEx and UPS just because they know FedEx and UPS. I mean, if you're interested in actually transporting your wine, you frankly ought to use WOVO. A, we're less expensive, and B, we transport it in refrigerated trucks.
What a concept.
I mean, think about it, right? I mean, you're spending hundreds of dollars on your wine, and for all you know, it's in the back of a UPS truck at 90 degrees.
It's funny. I mean, we could talk forever and ever about this, but the shipping is a real big problem, especially I live in Southern California. People live in the Midwest. I know there are people that are like, they'll hold their wine for 4 months somewhere because they just don't want it shipped to them, even though they want their wine. They just can't. I don't know. I know our FedEx driver. He's a nice guy, but I wouldn't say he really cares very much about that wine in the back. Nice guy. But, well, Jeff, this is incredibly illuminating. I really appreciate your time. I know you're a busy guy, so it was great to talk to you about this.
Thank you for inviting me, and thanks to your whole team for putting this together.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to be calling your cell phone to get this wine out of my damn house now. So
okay, let me turn it on now. All right. Thanks a lot.
Thank you. I want to thank everybody for listening. If you have a lot of wine of extreme value or just a large volume, and you want to see what these guys can do, WOVO, go to wovo.wine, UOVO.wine, to learn more about them and talk to them. If you have a bunch of fashion or art to store, I guess they can help you with that too. I want to thank everybody for listening. I want to thank my producer, John Adams, and I would like to thank Jeff Stein for joining us. Thank you for the insightful conversation. All of you who love this podcast, I always remind you at the end of this, please leave us a great review wherever you listen, whether that's Spotify or Apple Pods or whatever country you're in. We love reading what you write, and we really appreciate the feedback. We're going to be doing a mailbag episode pretty soon, so if any of you have any questions for me or any of the other guests that we normally have on the podcast, please hit us up on Instagram is the best. Send us a private message to Som Film, Som TV, or me personally, and let us know what questions you'd like to know about the films, about our content, about, you name it in the wine business. We will find an answer for you. So we'll be doing a mailbag episode coming up very soon. So send us those questions. You can also email hello@somtv.com with your questions, and we will get those answered on a podcast coming up. Thank you, everybody. Please drink something great. Make sure you store it properly, obviously. And we will talk next week. Bye-bye.